Morning. It is great to have you here on this first Sunday of 2026. Before we get started here, would you think back to your childhood for a second? For some of you, you're still in your childhood, and for some of you, it's been a little bit longer than others, and that's okay. But I want you to think back for your childhood, and I want you to think about your favorite game that you played as a child. For some of you, maybe it's a video game. For some of you, maybe it's a board game. For some of you, maybe it's marbles. Maybe you played with sticks. I don't know, but I want you to think about what it was that you had, your favorite game, and I want you to tell the person beside you, or maybe you need to turn around and tell the person behind you what it was, but go ahead, you can do that. So for me, as you're thinking about that, as you're reminiscing in time, as you're thinking about your favorite games that you had, for me, one of my favorite games as a child was Tecmo Bowl, okay? And so I grew up in the 80s, and, we went from Atari to Nintendo, and Nintendo was a really revolutionary idea. It was like an arcade in your own house. Your friends got to play with you. It was really, really, really great. And so my favorite game at the time was Tecmo Bowl. And I remember a couple years ago, I was playing a version of Tecmo Bowl, okay? And I was playing it this was just a couple years ago. And my kids walk in and they say, "What is that?" Not "Hey, what game are you playing?" Like, "What is that thing on your screen?" You see back in the 80s, those were some really, really good graphics. The blocks that were running around, and my kids had no idea what it was about. But there was a version of Tecmo Super Bowl, or Tecmo Super Bowl 3, I think it was, and it became my brother and I's favorite game. And what we would do is we found out that if you could win the Super Bowl 3 times in a row, that you got to unlock all these legendary players, like legendary players like Lawrence Taylor and Walter Payton and Gale Sayers and you name it, Joe Namath, whatever. They were on this game, and you can unlock it, but you had to win the Super Bowl 3 times in a row. But the problem is winning the Super Bowl 3 times in a row took forever to do. And when you're young, or even now, we live in a world of impatience. And so my brother and I figured out this little loophole through it. What we would do is we would skip through our whole season. We would skip through the whole season. We'd get to the playoffs. And when our team was in the playoffs, we would skip the first few playoff games, but we would reset it if we lost. Like we found out that if we hit reset on the console, that the game saved right as us in the version of the playoffs. So if we would lose, we could reset it, we could load it up again and go about it. And so that's how we unlocked all those great players in Tecmo Super Bowl 3. You see, resetting is really great when you can use it to start back where you want to start, and make sure that you don't lose any of that other stuff, and the point where things went wrong, you lost, whatever it was, would be great if life was that way. You see, we live in a world of resets. Chances are you've probably had to call customer service for something in your life, right? And you get transferred about 13 different times, and you're on hold for about 90 minutes. And what's the first question they ask you? Have you turned off your device and turned it back on? And you were thinking in your head, listen, you think I'm going to sit here for 90 minutes and be transferred 13 times and not try to turn it off about 13 different times? But you've been there. We live in a world where sometimes we get to reset things, and it kind of brings us back up and it starts us over. Unfortunately, life doesn't bring us that. Unfortunately for life, we can't have that sort of reset. The things that took place in 2025 or the things that happened in 2024 or whatever it was, we can't necessarily come up and reset and do it all over again. It doesn't work that way. Our life doesn't work that way. The closest thing we have kind of to a reset is when the calendar flips over to January 2026 or the next year, and it's kind of, your calendar's a little bit empty. The year is very young, and we get a chance to kind of maybe start fresh, but reset a little bit and refocus on some of the things in which maybe we've lost track of over the year. Or maybe for some of us, we want to forget some of the things in which took place in 2025 and some of the pressures that happened and some of the pain that took place. We want to forget that, and we want to leave that all behind, and we want to focus on 2026. But see, the problem is for some of us, we often walk in to a new year with all the stuff that's still carrying over. Maybe unmet expectations, maybe the issues of control, maybe it was plans, maybe pressures. I don't know where it's been, and maybe for you set out to start new this year, and things were going to be different, and you're already on the 4th day of January, and you're like, Well, that didn't last long, right? Life stinks. This happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and this is going on. I don't know where you are at, but I do know that 2026 can give you a chance to reset. That doesn't mean that life is going to be easy, and that doesn't mean that you're going to be absence of trials and absent of fear and absent of those things. That's not necessarily what that means. But what it does mean is that we can take steps this year to make sure that we build blocks of faith, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today a little bit is I'm not going to give you specific goals like, hey, you need to lose 15 pounds and you need to read your Bible every single day and you need to make sure that you share your faith to every single person. That's not me to do that for your New Year's resolutions. But what I want us to do is I want us to talk about today of maybe one area in our lives that all of us should strive to grow in when it comes to this coming year of 2026. And that's building blocks of faith. You see, last week, Ed, if you were here on Sunday, Ed gave his testimony a little bit about how he ended up here at church in 1995 and how he ended up right here in December of 95 and how he said something that was key in his little testimony. He said, listen, that was like one, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, that was one block of faith. That was one step of faith of a road of constant taking steps of faith. And for you and I, that's very, very true. And we are just like that. Like we may have certain areas in our lives where we've had to really reach out and really step out on faith. But each and every day, our faith can grow and be stronger. So 2026, the area in which you can grow, the area in which we all can grow, is to increase our faith, trust, and obedience in Him. You see, we're gonna look at Genesis chapter 12 here for a second, and if you have your Bibles, you can turn this. There's a guy by the name of Abram or Abraham, right? And we know a lot about Abraham, hopefully you do, and he's known for his faith that comes out and that he has, and how he has acted in faith, and how his life was built. And we're going to take the first part of his life and go. And if you understand Genesis is broken up into two sections, chapters 1 through 11, right, are a section of Genesis, and that's kind of the beginning and the creation, and we have the flood, and we have the Tower of Babel, we have Cain and Abel, we have Adam and Eve, we have the fall of man. All those things happen in the first 11 chapters of Genesis. That's how we start, right? And then we get to chapter 12, and things change a little bit. The focus goes more so from the 11, and it begins to follow four people: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And so we're going to start with how God's plan of redemption, how God's plan of everything continues through and builds on Abraham. But let's look at the man of Abraham here really quick. If you have Genesis chapter 12, you can read it along with me. The Lord had said to Abraham, "Leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you." Look at that. Three things that he tells him right away. The Lord said to Abram, leave your native country, leave your relatives, leave your father's family, and go to a land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran, and he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all his wealth, his livestock, and all the people he had taken into his household at Haran, and headed for the land of Canaan. When they arrived in Canaan, Abram traveled through the land as far as Shechem. There he set up camp beside the oak of Morah. At that time, the area was inhabited by Canaanites. So you see this, and so to kind of paraphrase the story a little bit here he is, Abraham, just chilling. He's 75 years old, just kind of like ready to, live off his wealth, live off the things in which he has, live in the land. He's been comfortable for so many years in his life, and all of a sudden God comes knocking on his door and says, listen, I want you to leave everything that you know, and I want you to leave everybody that you know, and I want you to go and go. And he's like, and I'm sure Abraham's like, well, where am I going? And God's like, I will show you when you get there. You see, there was no Apple CarPlay or Google Maps or an atlas or for some of you that still use them, maps on where to go, right? And there was none of that stuff that took place. Abraham was forced to make a decision pretty quickly, made a decision on what he was going to do. Is he going to act on faith? Is he going to be obedient and go and follow where God is leading him? or what's he going to do? And I love that in verse 4 it says, so he departed as the Lord instructed. He went where he needed to go. He acted in obedience. So what does this leave us for today? Number one, release. You see, Abraham had to release some of the things in which he had. He had to release and let go of things, let go of his comforts, let go of some of the different things in his life in order to move forward. Our first mission trip to Belize, I was thinking about this morning actually, so this wasn't even intentional, but I know Dave Whittlesey, he was on that trip, I believe, and I remember that we packed up and we had planned for all these supplies. We had all these supplies ready to go because we had no idea what to expect. We brought all our Bible school stuff, everything. So everybody not only had a suitcase of their clothes, but we also had a suitcase of supplies and tools or whatever else that we needed during that time. And so we carried all these suitcases. Well, we showed up to our hotel on that very, very first night, and it was overbooked. And so we had no place to stay. So we had to stay, we felt like, Mary and Joseph or whatever, I guess. There's no room for us at the inn or whatever. But they were nice enough. They found us a place that was a little bit better probably than a cave and a manger and so on and so forth. But we went and across the street. And so here we go. I want you to just imagine this. We had 10 people. We had backpacks. We had probably some of them had carry-ons. And we had like all this luggage that we were carrying around across the street, rolling. Most of them had wheels on it at that time, but not all of them. I mean, you got two hands. I mean, it was crazy the amount of luggage that we had there. And I mean, some of us walk through life just like that. We're carrying on so much luggage and so much stuff that we don't know, that we just keep adding on. We have 2 suitcases, a carry-on, a backpack, whatever else we can try because we don't know necessarily what to get rid of or how to get rid of it, or we aren't willing to part with it. We're not willing to release it. And so this baggage weighs us down in our lives. You see, Abraham, he had to release his country. And what his country probably represented was his comfort. He was comfortable there. He lived there 75 years. He lived in this place that he called home, and it was his comfort. And for some of us, we need to release our comfort. For some of us, we're way too comfortable when it comes to our lives. And comfort isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing unless it prevents us from walking in faith and being obedient, okay? And so we sometimes we just get too comfortable. Maybe for you, you're too comfortable, just being at home, or maybe you're too comfortable, not sharing your faith. Maybe you're too comfortable, going to Bible study. You need to serve, or maybe you're too comfortable serving that you need to go and be in a Bible study, or whatever it is. Oftentimes in our lives, we become too comfortable. And for Abraham, one of the things that he had to release when he left was his comfort. He had to give up his country. Next, he had to release people. You see, there's lots of relationships and lots of people that he probably had contact with, and he had to release that. And there might even be people that thought he was crazy. Like, what are you doing, Abraham? Why are you leaving? What are you doing? Why would you go? You're 75 years old. You are old. What are you doing? And you don't have anything left to offer. You can't do that. Those could have been conversations that took place. But you see, Abraham had to release that aspect of his life, and he didn't live for the approval of people. And I think so oftentimes in our lives, we live for the approval of people. I mean, one of the biggest issues that's in social media, and I know some of you aren't all on social media and stuff, but some of the biggest issues is that need for constant approval, is that need for that constant feedback and knowing, or that constant, I have to be right, or this constant this, or this constant that, and you focus so much on the approval of other people and whether or not people like you, and then where it gets really dicey is when you start comparing yourself to other people. Well, how come that family doesn't have those problems? How come that person doesn't have problems? How come that person's better than I am? I'll never be as good as that person. I'll never be as great as that person. I'll never be able to do that. Oh, look at that house. And this is the issue is, and you hear me say this about every sermon probably, but oftentimes we compare our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. And that's where it gets dangerous, because we're living for the approval of others. And Abraham at the time in his life, he needed to give that up. And he needed to give up the approval of others and realize that he needed to release the people in which he was close to and went. Yes, some went with him, absolutely. But he released, like he didn't take the whole community with him. released his household. You see, his identity and his inheritance were also tied there. You see, an inheritance and identity and your place in your community was extremely important in those days. And so as a result, one of the things that he had to do is give up that to follow this adventure of God. You see, sometimes we hold on to too much luggage. I told you the story about Belize, but this last week, Darlene had to prove, this is funny, like for insurance purposes, she had to prove that her and I were married. So she was looking through and trying to find our marriage certificate, which, it's been a few years probably since we've seen that marriage certificate. But we all looked. We looked everywhere. We looked absolutely in everything. Like, we uncovered stuff that we didn't even know we had looking for this marriage. We found the VHS tape of our wedding, but not our marriage certificate. We found our wedding invitation, that went out in our program, but not our wedding certificate. And you go through and you realize that through the years you collect and you keep a lot of stuff, right? And things that we didn't even know we had some of that stuff, right? And whether it was things from our high school or yearbooks or whatever it was, we had so much stuff that we were going through and looking for. And I wonder how many times in our lives that we do that exact same thing, we can't necessarily find what we're looking for because we're so bogged down with all the stuff that we kept and all the stuff that we haven't released. And I wonder what it is for you in your life. What about you? Where is it that you need to release? What is something in your life that you need to let go of? Maybe it's a relationship that's severed and maybe it's pain that took place. Maybe it's a family situation. Maybe it's a financial concern. I don't know what it is that's dragging you down. I don't know where it is that you need to say, God, I don't know how you're going to work through this. I don't know how we're going to do this, but I know that you're going to walk through me. And I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to walk in obedience to you and trust you this year to walk me through this year of 2026. So I don't know what you need to release and where you need to be obedient, but I trust that there's something in your life that God is knocking on your door and saying, like, listen, why don't you get rid of this? Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's whatever it is. But what does God want you to release? Like Abraham, when God came knocking on his door, he needed a release. Abraham kind of got a reset, and God came knocking on his door at age 75 and said, listen, you need to go, and I'll show you when. And so he had to release. Next, realign. Shift who you're trusting. Who is it that you trust? And this is a tough one. Because I can tell you, as I was thinking about this one a little bit in our life, how it relates to my life. And I think so many times, probably in my life, I become, I remember this. It's always kind of been a pattern, and it always happens from time to time. But like especially in college, like in college, you would go and you would spend so much time reading and studying the Bible, and you're like, do I really want to read the Bible just to read it for myself, or do I want to read the Bible, because I have to for a class or because I have to do that? And so many times, there's a cycle that takes place. So sometimes we're so into doing the work of God or doing something that we forget sometimes to be the person of God, the person that God wants us to be, and just to be in His presence and just to do that. And that's kind of a cycle that takes place, and it has to do with the alignment that we have in our heart and the alignment that we have. Do you believe God is who He says He is? Do you believe that God can lead you and direct you in the areas that you need to be led? Jesus says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, but yet you do not do what I say? You see, so many times we take a walk with Jesus instead of being led by Jesus. And I think that's so incredibly important for us to check our alignment from time to time, to make sure that we're realigning to where we want to go. And Abraham had to do the same thing. You see, this is what God promised him. He says, listen, I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. And I know most of you understand the story of Abraham, but just in case you don't, Abraham had no kids. And so in order to be a great nation, and in order to be a father of a great nation, so to speak, you have to have heirs. And then there's another biological problem. He was 75, okay? And there was a problem there. But this is what God promised. He didn't tell him how, and He didn't even tell him when, but He told him, these are the promises that I'm giving you. This is what I promise that I will be aligned. I need your alignment. I need you to align yourself and to trust me during the situation, during your life, during this thing. And it didn't happen immediately. And in fact, if you read through Genesis, it took nearly 25 years for Abraham and Sarah to have a kid. 25 years of waiting for God's promise to be fulfilled. Probably conversations in the head. God, is this really real? Is this going to happen? I mean, it would be for me. I'd have conversations. Did I hear that right? Was it something I ate? What was it? Like, was it not right? What's going on? Why is it taking so long? But God was in the plan of working and going through this. And he promised, and if he promises something, he never breaks his promises. And I think that's what's so important for us to understand is that there are promises that he's given you that he's never going to break. Do you realign your trust? You need to realign yourself from self to God. You know, God has created each of you with abilities. And he has created you that way. And you should use those abilities for the glory of God. Use those abilities to further his kingdom, to see how he can use you to work through. That's how you should work. But sometimes we rely so much on our own selves. And we begin to think we're the reason things happen. And because of my ability, look at this, and my ability, and maybe pride seeps in a little bit. When in reality, what needs to happen is the alignment check. You need to make sure that you're relying on God and not yourself. Outcome to obedience. You see, faith obeys before results. You see, I don't know what God wants you to do or where he's going to lead you in 2026. But I do know as you build your faith, as you build your blocks of faith, that it's going to take obedience before results. Abraham was obedient. It took 25 years for things to work out. It wasn't, whatever year it was. It wasn't 2026. It fit, right? It wasn't the next day. It took time for things to work out. But God, he doesn't show him how, and he doesn't even explain when. He just listens. I need you to trust me. I need you to walk with me. Walk with me, and this is what's going to happen. You walk with me, this is what's going to happen. And there's similar truths that take place in our lives when we walk with God. Last, so we just did realign. Now we did respond. What's your response? You see, Abraham's response was immediate obedience. So Abraham went as the Lord had told him. No dialogue, no debate, no delay. He immediately went and he left. Later on in the story of Abraham, and I challenge you to read it, but Abraham has a son, and his son's name is Isaac. And so there's a time where God comes to Abraham to show him his faith, to see Abraham's faith some more. And he comes to him and he says, listen, I want you to sacrifice your son. And I want you to go and you're going to do that. And what's amazing in the scripture there is like, it says that he got up in the morning and went. He got up and went. So as soon as that happened, as soon as God says, listen, Abraham, I want you to sacrifice your son. I'm sure that didn't make any sense. I mean, this is a promise that God had. He promised him that, Isaac was going to, was going to be, in that lineage. There was promises there, and it probably didn't make any sense to Abraham at all. But his faith was there. And he was willing to give what he couldn't afford to give. And he immediately got up and left and obedient. He didn't think, hey, man, that one must have been a bad dream or something along those lines. He didn't think that. He immediately got up and he immediately left. And his response was complete obedience. You see, Abraham's life is great because it shows us areas of our faith. It shows us that we can obey even when we don't understand. It shows us that we can believe when we can't see. And it shows us that we can give, that we should give when we can't necessarily afford to give. Chances are there's going to be fear in your life. And fear necessarily isn't, having courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. It's despite the unknowns, the uncertainties, the things in your life that you're not really sure how it's going to work out. And as you walk in obedience, it fuels momentum. Meaning this is that your life begins to build that faith. And your faith increases by each decision and by each act of obedience that you have. I was thinking, and I know Ed shared like his story last week, but I was thinking about it too, and how connecting to it and stuff like that. I remember, when I was a senior in high school, I knew where God was calling me to go to college. I knew what he wanted me to do. I knew where I should go, and I didn't really want to go. And I knew God wanted me to go. I just felt strongly in my soul that God wanted me to go to a small Bible college in Ohio. And when I was a senior, I tried really, really hard to kind of negotiate said things and maybe try different things. I remember I even went on a couple college visits with Mandy. I think we went to Southwest Missouri or Baptist University in Bolivar, Missouri, and then we also went to Northwestern in Orange City. And I remember sitting there having conversations in my head and saying, listen, God, this isn't bad. This is only like 4 hours away, 5 hours away. This would be a really good spot. And the whole time I realized that, this impression upon my soul was like, hey, but you know where I want you. And I'm like, yeah, but that's so far away. It's so far away from my family and stuff like that. And it was tough because at that time I also had my family wasn't necessarily believers at that time, and so trying to tell your parents who aren't believers that you're going to go to a non-accredited small Bible college in the middle of Southern Ohio was tough. And I didn't know how it was all going to work out and how God's blessing, because I really loved the community that I was raised in. I really loved being here in Indianola, Iowa. I love my friends here. Maybe it was I didn't want change. I don't know. But the gist is I loved it here, and I didn't want to leave. And finally, after wrestling with it for months and months and months, and finally I just gave in, and I just said, finally, God, I'm going to do it. See, I wasn't as quick as Abraham. It took me a little bit longer, to come to the conclusion that I thought maybe I could change God's mind. I did not. But anyway, and so I went, and as a result, listen, my life changed as a result of that act of faith of going to college and making that big. But that was just one act of faith. That was just one decision of faith that took place in our lives. It's got to be a constant thing. So for you in 2026, what is it that you need to release? Where is it that you need to realign? And how is it that you need to respond to Him? Release, realign, and respond. Just like Abraham and just like the promises that God gave Abraham, God gives us promises as well. You see, God promises His presence. He says He'll never leave you or forsake you. He's always going to be with you. Wherever you are at, whatever you're going through, He will walk through you. He doesn't mean that He's going to clear the path and it's going to be easy and smooth sailing. Never does He promise that. In fact, He promises the opposite. But what He does promise is that He'll be with you. Maybe you need guidance, and maybe God promises you that He will give you guidance. Maybe He promises you that He'll give you peace, provision, forgiveness. He'll give you purpose. I don't know what promise of a bazillion that you need here today, and where you need to have your faith and how you need to increase your faith each day by walking with Him. But I do know that every person in this room can improve their faith. We all can. Because it's all about direction, not perfection. None of us are perfect. And it's about direction, not perfection. So as we move through in 2026, would you bow your heads with me for a second? Would the worship team come on up? Just like a reset. When you get to reset a video game or reset your phone. 2026 can provide that opportunity. The calendar's a little lighter right now. The hopes of the year, the changes that you want, things are different. How is it this year you can grow in your faith? Where is it that you need to trust Jesus? Is there some unforgiveness, some pain, some uncertainty, some fear that's dwelled up into your heart and your soul that you need to release here today? Get rid of that baggage that you've been carrying around. Maybe you need to realign. Or maybe you have an idea of what God wants you to do, and you just need to have the courage to do it. And you need to take that step and walk that way. Father, as you reveal to us truths in our lives and directions that you want us to move, would you help us to trust you? Would you help us to increase our faith in 2026? Build a block of faith that in 20 years we can look back and say, 2026 was a huge year of growth of faith for me. God, if there's things that we're trying to hold on to and control of things that we're trying to have, or situations that we're trying to figure out, God, would you help us to release it? whatever it is in our heart that we need to give up and release, would you help us? If our devotion isn't to you, would you realign that? Would you lead us? God, wherever you take us in 2026, we want to ask your blessing on it. God, help us to have the courage to follow you, the courage to act in faith, the courage to obey. And just like Abraham, trust you even when things don't make sense. God, we love you and we thank you in your name.